So just while Mal's getting to that point where I can talk about it in ArchiCAD, just to reiterate that you are working in a part of ArchiCAD, it's called the project map, and in the project map, everything's set up around having these things that ArchiCAD calls stories. And we mentioned already that for a single story house, we have 3 stories, as in there is a site story where we do all the site drawings, and we're going to do those later. There is a story that has the ground floor, and at the moment for your batch 1, we have a roof story. That's all we have. If you have a 2-story house, obviously we have to introduce an extra story in between your ground story and your roof. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward, isn't it? So you can do that anytime in ArchiCAD, add stories, and we'll show you how to do that. And by adding those stories, you can have more and more stories in your house. Okay? So if we want just a house that has a single story and a ground floor, then typically we only need to do this. So what we'll get to is you guys are working in here at the moment. So this is called your navigator. Okay? And at the moment we've told you absolutely nothing about the navigator. And it's just by default sitting in this one here called the project map. And we've been drawing in here. And the project map is where we basically set the project up in its basic form. Not much more than that. But the important thing is when you are in your project map, you can click on your, not the organizer part yet, just to, for the settings.
Right.
Yeah, but I think also, does your screen not cover everything? At the bottom of the page, there should be just a settings button, because that's what I personally use it. No, in here, yeah. So this settings button here, in this corner of the project map, if you click on here, Mel just showed you another way of getting to it, you'll get that box there up. If you're in any other part of this, you won't get that box up, you'll get a different box up. But in this, when you're in your project map and you click on settings, here is where you can make the decisions on all the different stories that you have in your building. So it's almost the very first thing you typically do when you start working on a project. You go, well, how big is my project? How many stories? I mean, when you start your design, you're probably already going to know it's going to be so many stories. But even if you don't, you can always come back to your project map, click on here, and add stories. So we've got one, these are the default ones, aren't they, Mel? Pretty much.
Yeah.
So your sea level datum is basically where we do all the stuff to do with the site. So when we build a terrain model, we get you to build terrain models of the site, all that stuff to do with the site, we can put on that sea level story. Yeah? So it's really nothing to do with the house itself. It's just site stuff. And some of those things, a little bit of, decks, are they part of the site? Are they part of the house? So some of those surrounding things can be a little bit, where do we put them? But it's not a biggie. But mostly if they're attached to the house, they're part of the house, like a deck. Does that make sense? So we keep that on that ground floor story. It's part of that house kind of thing. So that's our sea level. Ground floor, as we said, the ground floor picks up everything that basically goes Okay. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on to that ground floor story. At the moment we are doing design. So at the moment that ground floor story is really, really simple. It basically has a slab for the floor. It has walls with windows and doors and things in, yeah? And ArchiCAD automatically cuts it off at a certain level. So that's why when you look at your floor plan, you're actually looking through a cut wall, aren't you? You're looking down on a wall and it's cut at a certain level. How high is not that critical at the moment. But you also cut through your windows, you cut through your doors, so you look down on all those things. Reasonably straightforward, yeah? Okay. So that is your ground floor in terms of, now I might just pop back to that thing for a moment.
Yeah, all right.
So that's your ground floor, and in our case here, we just happen to have for our batch project just a roof story, yeah? And if you want to add more, it's quite simple. If you've got that highlighted on the ground floor, it just says insert above. And you click on there and you can put another floor in. Or if you happen to be on the roof one, you could have inserted below and put in a first floor. Nothing difficult there. So the other thing, we're not going to get into it now, but you'll see that wherever you look at these things is you have figures of height to next. So when we get to the major project house, everything in this country is relative to sea level for heights. Okay, everything. So we will find out that we will give you a house and it'll have a floor level given to you, a level of that floor. The level of that floor is relative to sea level. Okay? So if we know that, we can punch that in here and it will set up our ground floor to the right floor level for us. Yeah? Does that make sense as well? Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Okay, so we typically know that and we can work on it.
Just example there.
So, and it's in millimetres, so that's why Mal's put in 10,000. So that's basically 10 metres above sea level. Yep, does that make sense? 10 level above sea level, yep. So we can do all that, and then we've got a starting point. So that becomes our floor level, and then if we know it at that stage, but it doesn't matter if we don't, we can then make a call of how far to, in this case, to the roof story. Or if we got another floor, like in that example there, we can say, what's the floor to floor height? And we can say, yeah, it's there to there, and it sets it up in here, and we can come back and change it if we have to. So one of the things I have is when I'm doing design work, and I've got a 2-storied house, at the point I'm starting design, I don't actually know how thick that floor's going to be, because I haven't designed the mid-floor framing or anything. So I take a guess, an educated guess, because I've been doing it long enough, I can take a reasonable guess that it's going to be da-da-da-da-da. But part of what I might have already decided is I know how big the wall frames are. So I might be saying my standard one is a 400 high wall frame. Yep. And then I go, okay, I'll guess that I'm using 240 joist, 20 mil flooring, da-da-da-da-da. So I make up a floor to floor, and I can put that in. Or in this case here, a height of those walls, and say, okay, our roof is going to sit on top of that. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward process, but it only occurs in here, in the project map, where we're doing kind of setup type of stuff. We're setting up the project, and we can start drawing in here, as you know, because you've been drawing in that project map. Yeah? Okay, so back to our navigator, this little thing here. So it has 4 boxes, and you'll get really good at using these after a while because they're very important. So we can start our project here, but it is here in this thing called the view map where we start to take it to a whole nother level. So it's in the view map that we create our drawings specifically to each of the drawings we want to be able to show our client or do for council, whatever. It is here that we get into being able to make decisions about what we want on a drawing. Okay? So I just pointed out on the ground floor, at the moment, you've pretty much got a slab and walls and windows and things. When we start to get into the here, and you get further on into it, that floor slab will become, for your working drawings, 20 mil flooring, 140 joists at 400 centres, bearers, piles, footings, yeah, a whole lot of stuff. But guess what? It is still all there on the ground floor plan. All these different things. But when we're doing, for example, a floor plan, we don't want to see all those other things. Does that make sense? We just, on our floor plan, we want to see a floor and walls and windows and doors and other, bits and pieces. But we want other things not shown. So this is where we introduce and start talking about layers and layer combinations. Now these are the trickiest things for students generally, for anybody getting their head around how ArchiCAD works. And it's different from Revit, which you'll use in the second year. It has a different way of organising this. But the way ArchiCAD works is it uses what are called layers and layer combinations. So what do I mean by this? So here's a floor plan that's been, one of the students has lent to us just for the sake of this, is basically everything you see on here can be designated or given, or has to be given, a layer. So it's just a term, a layer. Okay, so if Mel highlights this particular item, which you can see is a table, the layer it has at the moment, rightly or wrongly, is called Des Furniture. So the way it works in terms of layers, for starters, is that we have DES, D-E-S, which stands for design, and we have DOC, which stands for document, I'm assuming, isn't it? And basically, the simple rule is anything that is a 3D object will be given a layer with DES. Good old DES for 3D objects. And anything that's 2D, such as a line, or a fill, or a note, or a dimension, things like that, which aren't 3D, they will be given a DOC layer. Okay? So, you go, where the heck did all these things exist? So if Mal clicks and does Control L, which is a shortcut, and that's one you've got to know because you do this all the time. All the time. If he does Control L.
See, that's just a scenic view to show you the shortcut, but Richard's right, Control L.
So you can go that way, but you'll just get used to always doing Control L, or it's probably Command L for your for the Mac people, Command L. And when you click that, you get up this, comes up. Okay? So this is made up of two parts. So if Mal for start and just scrolls through this one, here's all the layers. These are the layers. And the idea is that mostly they're all made for you already. But you can add more. You can make your own layers. But by doing that, this gets longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. So it's better if you can to use layers that are there already and are relevant and right, and you read them and go, that makes sense to me. So that table under DES, because it's a 3D object, was put under furniture. Does that sound like a good layer to put that on? Absolutely. And there is a reason why we put all the furniture on a furniture layer, because when you guys get to the next stage of working drawings, the builder doesn't want to know any furniture. They don't build tables and chairs or sofas or dining tables. They're not interested in furniture. They're not pricing it, they're not building it. But we don't have to delete anything. This is the whole beauty of it, is we have the ability with these little eyeballs to turn them on and off. And that's the basis of a layer. That we put something on the right layer and somewhere we make a decision of what we want to see. So Mel might just demonstrate the fact that we got stuff on, if you go back to the plan. Oh no, well you can do it here. He's going to turn off.
So I just turned off furniture, so I'm going to turn it back on.
Oh, okay.
See all the green things?
See all the green things that happen to be under furniture? I'm not saying he's got all the layers on the things on the right one, but if Mal turns off the furniture layer, then anything that happens to be given that name disappears. But it hasn't gone anywhere, it's still there, It's just been turned off. So can you see the power of layers? We have the ability to turn them on and turn them off. So when we're on that floor plan and we might later have drawn subfloor framing, all these different bearers and piles and all these things, we can have them turned off. They're still there. They're still on the ground floor. They're just turned off. Yep, so that is the basis of a layer. And we have to do that over here in our view map. So why there? Because the reason it's called a view map is whatever you have drawn, if Mal goes to the view map and he goes to the ground floor plan here, whatever is here and showing, when we go to put it on a piece of paper, that is what you'll see on your piece of paper. That is what you'll see. What is set up in the view map under this particular drawing, ground floor, and again we'll show you a little bit more detail, that is what will show. So that is always the be all and end all. When you guys are in your view map and up comes this drawing here, that is what, if you take that and put it on a piece of paper, what will print, what you will see. Yep. Does that make sense? Okay. So that is why we very quickly get to the view map. The project map, we can start drawing, get things going, but in the project map, you cannot control any of that stuff to do with layers. It's not in the project map. All it is under settings, as you saw, is you can set up stories. Okay, now that Mal is over here, and he goes to settings, can you make that so we can see a bit more of the page? If he goes to settings now into that box, guess what? Completely different information required.
And right click on the plan as well to do the same thing, guys. So see if you right click, you can go to view settings. And that brings
Either
up
one.
the same way.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, so it's up to you. But typically, if you can see the whole screen, you can see that box. So, that's part of the story. So you got the head a little bit about layers. Everything we can put up goes onto a layer. So I'll just leave that for a moment, that doing that setting stuff. If we just go back to your floor plan, and you highlight any object in your floor plan again, doesn't matter what, pick anything you like. Okay, a wall. So you'll see that by highlighting the wall, up comes the information, you know it's on the wall tool. And you can see right next to it, the layer it is on. Okay, and that's why for me, rather than double clicking on the wall tool, I always go up here and double click here, because I actually am having a little look to see what the layer is. And I do it all the time, still, after using this forever and ever. I forget to check what layer I am working on the tool, go to put it in and thought, oh, I wonder what layer I put it on. Because I go out of the drawing, come back and go, where's it gone? Because I put it on some layer that might have been turned off or something, and it all gets horribly nasty. So the other side of it is, if you double click and open walls, at the bottom will be the layer that it goes onto. Okay? So again, if you click on that box, up comes all your layers saying, do you want to change it? Is it the right one? You know, what layer do you want? Okay? So you can open it up here and change it as well. Yep.
So when you were clicking on and off the eyeballs so you could see it, one of the cars disappeared in one state. So obviously
One of the what state?
cars.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Probably, well, but let's check it out.
How do you get that layer onto the same layer?
Okay.
We'll do
Cool.
that. Well, let's
We'll
try
do
that,
that.
yeah.
So it now goes back to the floor plan. So that's what I'm saying. This is why you have to be really, really careful and make sure when you start drawing anything, you check the layer.
So one of these
Because-
cars, is that right?
Yep, if you
It's-
highlight
it's-
that car,
I'll
let's
throw
see
that
what
on.
layer that's on.
Yeah, so I'll just, let's see, was it design furniture? You're saying that when we did this and we hit it, so this one stayed on, so we don't
The other
think,
one went off.
let's highlight that one. It's on design 3D only bits.
Okay, so it's on a different layer.
I think you can hit this, and I think you can just change it by going, if I change furniture now, see the way the layer's off? It should disappear.
Because it's changed it to a layer that's turned off.
And what you might find is that, see if you've lost something, and you don't know what, you say, I know I drew it. You can turn them all on, just, there's a thing I think here, you can just turn on all the layers, to make things come back. And then you can click on it and say, oh, find it, and then check the layer. And that's what Richard's chatting about control, yeah.
So you'll get that at the moment, because we haven't told you anything about any of this. You have probably no idea what layer things were going on to. But ArchiCAD's smart, and mostly, it by default will mostly give you the right layer. So if you pick the wall tool, pretty much always it'll go to Des Wall, okay? But not everything, not all the time. It is not foolproof at all. It doesn't know all the things you want to put layers onto. Okay, so is everybody reasonably happy about what a layer is and the fact that everything has to go on a layer, and that layers are made up of design for 3D objects and dock for 2D objects? Yep. Okay, so Mal's going to do his Control L again, and he's going to bring up that table. And let's complicate it, because there's, on this side here, there's a thing called layer combinations. Layer combinations. Okay, so this is the added complexity that we have to deal with. Is not only do we have to put individual items onto individual layers, we also can set up each drawing to a layer combination. So as you can see, there's a whole lot here that are set up already, and most of them you'll be able to use by default. But when we're doing floor plans, we can use one called Plan Presentation Furniture, and that's a layer combination we can use when we're doing design floor plans. Design floor plans. However, when we go to our working drawings, there's one there called Plan Floor, and we can use that layer combination for our working drawing floor plan. Okay, so that's a slightly uncommon one. So let's have a look at one where we say, right, oh, we're going to get to, in our working drawings, we're going to get to do subfloor framing plans, okay, which is going to show your joists, bearers, piles, footings, all of that. There is a layer combination here called Plan Floor Framing. So we set up that drawing, the whole drawing, under that layer combination. The whole drawing is the layer combination that we use. So if Mal goes back just to our floor plan again, just to go back to here, and we're in our view map, and if we just click on our settings box down here, well, he's done it the other way.
I can't see the settings, that's why.
You can't see the settings. Okay, so if you clicked on there or did what he did, you get this come up. Okay? So the very first thing that happens is we set up our layer combination. So that is the very first thing we do. No, it's not, it's actually the second thing we do, but I'll tell you about that in a moment. However, when we open this up and we click on this drop box here, then all those layer combinations come up. And we make a decision, what is the layer combination we want for that particular drawing? Okay, so the layer combination is about the entire drawing that we're wanting to create. And we want to get the layer combination correct. Because, there is a really important reason, because if we use do a different drawing on the ground floor plan, say the floor plan, if we don't have a different layer combination, every time we go between those two drawings, if they have the same layer combination, whatever we turn off on one will turn off on the other, if they have the same layer combination. So really the idea is that we have a unique layer combination for that drawing, and everything we set on that drawing under that layer combination will stay there until we change it. So on the floor framing plan, we can see all those things that we've got on there with the subfloor framing, all that stuff under that layer combination. We go back to our ground floor plan, and because that has a different layer combination, all we see is the walls, windows, doors, and the floor. No subfloor framing. They're not turned on that layer combination. So generally, every drawing has its own layer combination as a starting point. Are you with me at this stage?
Yep.
So there are a few exceptions. So if you've got a two-storied house, you could use the same layer combination on the ground floor and the first floor. The same layer combination, because it's all the same information. The first floor has walls, floors, windows and doors. Ground floor has walls, floors. So generally they have exactly the same information. But pretty much every other drawing, pretty much every other drawing has its own layer combination. So there'll be layer combination for subfloor framing. There'll be one for mid-floor framing. There'll be one for roof framing. A separate one from the roof plan. That will have its own layer combination, because on the roof plan we want to see the roofing. On the roof framing plan, we don't want to see the roofing. We want to see what's underneath it. We want to see trusses or rafters and all that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? So this is the only way we can make drawings different and control them. First of all, by the layer combination, and secondly, about being able to turn on and turn off the layers on that layer combination to show what we want or hide what we want. Yeah? Getting there on this sort of principle of things. Okay, so I've got different things coming on. But what is incredibly important is under the settings, however Mal gets to it again, under the settings box here, under our project map, these settings here, once you set them,
Sorry, Richard, did you want the project map there or view maps?
well, we're in view map, sorry, and the settings box. So once we set those, they're done. You don't have to touch it again if you don't want to. Okay, so this sets up this particular drawing for all the things we want. So the first one was layer combination. So we picked that. So on this one here, it's probably going to be your plan presentation furniture. Boom, done. You cannot change that unless you go back into that settings and change it. It will never change on its own. It cannot change. You have set it in that settings box.
So let's say you've started your plan and then you realise your scale is wrong. If you change your scale, will the whole plan adjust to that, or would you need to restart?
Okay, so that's very good, because the next box is scale. Okay, so at the moment he's got 1 to 50, so this will be interesting, because mostly for design we use 1 to 100. 1 to 50 is normally our working
Can I ask
drawing
them a
scale.
question? Can we ask them a
Yeah.
question? Okay, here's a general question to you guys. What scale do we model at then? What scale are we doing our models at? All those walls you've been drawing for the last couple of weeks, what scale were they at? 1 to what? 1 to 50, okay. Any advance in that? What about over here? Any other answers? 1 to 50? Okay, 1 to 100. That's okay. So we've got 2 answers. What else? So were you actually looking at the dimensions 10, 800 and dividing it by 100 or 50, or did you just type it in directly? So it's 1 to 1, right? 1 to 1. You model it 1 to 1. This is where, again, this is very important. You decide on the output scale here when it becomes onto the paper. So in Revit or AutoCAD, it was model space and paper space. Is that right? So you've got to say, well, you've got a virtual model, which is 1 to 1, and then we've got to get it onto the paper somehow. And that's where the scale comes in. So back to you, Pat.
Okay, so yeah. So the scale, we've got standard scales for for our industry anyway, and you know this from Amos's class. And I'm sure he talked about scale, didn't he, of what drawings are and things. And a lot of them are at a bigger scale for our working drawings, so we can see more clearly with a lot more information. But when we're at design stage, we're not putting notes and references and all the stuff that we put on the working drawings. It's pretty basic at our design stage. So mostly we can get away with 1 to 100. But the other side of it is we have to be careful of is what size piece of paper we're going to put it onto. And you might find for design that if you're doing a really big house, it gets problematic if you did 1 to 50, because A3 is kind of the piece of paper that we use most commonly for drawings, because you don't need a fancy printer to do it, or if you haven't got an A3 printer, every shop will do A3. If you go up in size, it becomes incredibly expensive. So if you start going A2, A1, who has it for starters? So A3 is a fabulous sheet size for us as people drawing. And so often we have to think about the scale of the drawing to fit on the A3. I can tell you now, I have designed projects for us to use so the site fits on an A3, and I have to make sure the piece of land we put it on at the scale we want fits onto an A3. nothing to do with anything else. It is fitting it onto a piece of paper. It is critical. You guys have to end up with it on a sheet of paper. It's not so critical these days because we do very little printing, very little printing. For me now, I just do digital stuff and send it to clients, but I set it up on A3. So if they want to print it, they can print it, but so that's my basic format for drawings if I can. If I'm doing really big houses, I can't do 1 to 50s at A3. Just doesn't fit on. So you can imagine a floor plan, and you've got all these dimensions and references and da-da-da-da, well, you just can't do it. So it becomes a different exercise then of what size do you put it onto then. Okay, so anyway, so we set this up. So out of interest, because you actually model at no scale, at 1-to-1, at live, the whole thing, you tell it how big everything is. If Mel changes this here to 1 to 100, the scale, and goes okay, does it look any different? No, because in your model space, you're doing it, you're not doing it to scale, you're not drawing anything at a scale, only when we decide how big we want it for our sheet. So if he changes it back to a 1 to 50, it won't look any different. It just is the same. Yeah? So the scale is relative to the drawing that goes on the sheet. Yep, so it doesn't matter. There is one time it does affect it, and that is when you're doing text. So your text by default doesn't change scale, unfortunately. So you have to be really careful. So I tend to have text, separate lot of text for my design drawings, which are small here, and then a different type of text on my 1 to 50 because everything's bigger.
Is there like a print preview, like how do you know if this goes to?
Okay, we'll get to that, we'll get to that, we'll get to that. We haven't got that far yet. Okay, so project map, starting out with a project view map, where we now, we better finish off our settings stuff.
Is this in the view map?
Yep. Okay, so back to this one. So we've set this. There's some here that we basically don't have to worry about touching. So structural display, just don't have to worry about it, default's fine. Even pen set at the moment in here is not relative to printing. It is only a guideline, more or less. So that's not a biggie to have to change. Model view options, here is that one we talked about. At the moment, the default was 03, so we saw all the lollipops. These are all markers. So if we're going to turn those on when we want to do our working drawings. We need references. But for our design drawings, we don't want any of that. So under your settings here, we changed it to 03, no markers.
04.
04, just testing. 04, no markers.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Cool, thank you. So no markers. Simple as that. You're not deleting anything, you're not stuffing anything up, you're just setting that up. Okay, so back to your settings again now. What else we got? Next one, graphic override. At the moment, just no overrides is absolutely fine. We'll talk about that in a bit further down. It's not a biggie, but it can affect
Sections, yeah.
some of the drawings and what you see on a piece of paper. But at the moment, graphic overrides, leave it, that's fine. You guys, I use the renovated one all the time because I do lots and lots of additions and alterations to existing houses, and I use this renovation filter for that. It changes things to do with what you see that's existing, what's new, what's been demolished. For you, you're doing all new work, so you can leave no renovation filter as the default. Yeah? Okay, so once you've done that, where the mail is at the moment, don't know.
I don't know where each one was.
Oh,
I'll
just-
cancel it out. Yeah.
Oh, you left it on drafting, didn't you?
Did I? I thought I cancelled it. You see
Oh,
what-
no,
you
right,
see
cool.
what I cancelled it.
Okay, so once you've done that and click OK, that will stay like that forever until you go back in and change it. However, be aware all those things that were in that settings box are along here. So you can quickly and temporarily change any of those settings along here, but if you go out of that drawing and come back in, it will revert back to the settings you set. So they're just ones that if you want to say, like Mel said, oh, I want to see every layer turned on, he can go to his plan presentation, change the layer combination to all, and if they're all turned on, he will see absolutely every layer on that particular thing. But if he goes out of there, goes to another drawing, say a roof plan, and then goes back to his ground floor plan, it will go back to the layer combination. If he goes to the settings, it will there we go, defaults back to his plan presentation, because that's what he set up. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a lot to get your head around in terms of that. Everything you draw has a layer, and every drawing you set up in your project map has a layer combination. Yeah? So we can turn things on and off. That's how ArchiCAD, the basis of ArchiCAD works. Any questions on that? To that? Anything you want to add, Mel?
Well, look, there's also a slideshow, you'll see on one of the big blue buttons, ArchiCAD layers. So there's a thing trying to explain these dialog boxes and how the layer combinations, as Richard said, are specific to each kind of drawing. It's like a defense team in American football and an attack team, and you know, as usually a Frankenstein switches thing where you turn them on depending on who is singing in the band or whatever. So you have a look at that, they're like overlays, so have a look at that. And I've also put a little video up as well, which you can refer back to. It's the same things as Richard about turning them on, and how this is they call this quick views, because it's a quick view, but then as Richard says, when you go back, it'll revert back to the settings that you kind of stuck in there, okay? So there's some other resources as well.
Okay, so that's our project view, and the next box here is called the layout book, because every drawing that we have created in our view map, we want to put onto a piece of paper. Does that make sense? That's how our industry works, doesn't it? You've got to put it on a sheet of paper. Even if it's just a digital sheet of paper that you send to your client as a series of PDFs. We put it onto a piece of paper. And that is our next stage of taking that drawing there and putting it onto a piece of paper. So Mel's opened that up, and it comes through here with a whole lot of, at the moment, because it hasn't been cleared out, a whole lot of already created sheets of paper. And what will happen is when we give you the major project house, we clean out all of the stuff, and we teach you how to go from the project map to the view map, to the layout book, to the publishing set. We'll teach you so you understand of how do I get from that starting point to this point to publish. Okay.
I might try to clear this out.
Yeah, maybe that'd be quite good to do that. Okay.
Most of them are there. Yeah, most of it's apart from that master's thing.
Yeah, that's all right, that's fine. What's under there?
Yeah, won't let me do that. Get rid of
No,
that.
no, that's fine. No, no.
That's okay. Well,
Yeah, what's under there? Can you get rid of all of those or not? Should be able to.
there's no because there's stuff in there. Is that way?
Okay. So eventually you'll set all these up yourselves. We want you to understand how to do that. Even back to the point where, Mel might even do it again, to show you how to get from project to view with something you've set up in the project.
Okay. Won't let me.
Or you can leave that anyway. That's probably quite a good little example of something that's been put on a sheet.
Okay. Well, we can try it or do it from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go back to your project view map. Sorry. Do you want to just delete the ground and roof plan, and we'll show them how to get them to here from
Yeah,
here?
yeah, sure.
It's not letting you delete it.
See, it's just this down here.
Try that.
It must be because it's on a layer, perhaps.
No, it shouldn't be. Should be able to do it. Doesn't matter. We can still demo it anyway, Mel.
Yeah. Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a delete thing, and this red box isn't coming up for me here.
No,
in
that's
see, so,
very odd.
yeah,
Don't know
it's
why.
different, yeah.
No. Okay, but we can bring one across
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, I'll hide
Okay,
it.
so if we go back to our project map, and we have set up by default, these drawings get put in there by default because we've told them it's got a sea level, a ground floor, that they just get populated in there. Does that make sense? Because we set up those particular stories. So we go, okay, so we actually want, from the ground floor, is to make a ground floor plan into our view map. Yep. So there's a thing called, if we click up in here, called the organizer. The organizer. And if we click on the organizer allows us to move our way through the navigator system. Okay? So you'll see that on the left-hand side, if you've got clicked on the project map, and on the right-hand side, the view map, is we can actually take things from the project map to the view map. So for example, we've got a ground floor plan here.
I'm just gonna try to take this one out, which you can have
Okay.
one over the separate, yeah.
Yep, let's get it a bit cleaner.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a ground floor.
So here we have this ground floor plan over here, and at the moment we've got some boxes set up for plans. So this is really, really difficult. All Mal does is click on there, drag, and stick it on plans. Simple as that. It's just drag and drop. Drag the drawing we want, drop it where we want it into our view map. Nice and simple? Yep. Okay, so we've done that, and we've got the drawing crossed where we want, and this is where you want a good process, and I suggest you follow this every time you do this. So for me, the very first thing I do, if I now open that, I can click on there, or I can go back into here and it'll be here now. If I, maybe we just go back to there. So you'll see it's now been put here. So the very first thing I do down under properties is I get rid of the one. Down in your properties now,
Oh, like you mean-
yeah.
oh, okay.
So I just delete I don't need a number on there. So I get rid of that, and I now change the name of this to ground floor plan. That's what it is. It's not ground floor, it's a ground floor plan. Just like you're gonna have a subfloor framing plan and a roof plan, they're all plans, we're doing plans. Because when we get to sections, our sections, we got elevations, elevation. This is a plan. So he's gonna put a capital P there so he's consistent, just so that you're using the same numbering, naming. Okay, so number one thing you do, you drag it across, you rename it. Because guess what, you're going to drag that across, and you're going to take another one of those and you're going to call it a subfloor framing plan. So it's going to have a different name, but you've used exactly the same story. It's coming from the same story. So it'll come across as ground floor. So the first thing you do is say, no, I'm going to create a subfloor framing plan, whatever. Does that make sense? So you rename it as the very first thing. And once it's renamed here, it will stay renamed there. You don't have to change that unless you want to. So he's now renamed it. He can now go to the settings box, whatever method he wants to do. And under the setting box, so the second thing he now does is set up his layer combination, his scale, goes okay, and that drawing is set up, ready to work on. Yep. So that's just the practice you want to get used to doing. Dragging across, rename, set the settings up, done. It's done, forever. You're ready to go. You've got a ground floor plan under that layer combination. Ready to go. And then you can go and play around with it, because now that all those done, you can now turn on and off layers under that layer combination however you want. Whatever you want to see, whatever you don't want to see, your job. Turn them on and off. Okay, so the organizer is really the only way to be able to do this and control it. Okay, So we're now going to get Mel, the organiser, still open, and on the left-hand side, he's going to pick his view map, and on the right-hand side, he's going to pick his layout book. Okay? So what we want to do is get our ground floor plan that he's beautifully created, and we're going to drag it onto something. So typically we want to drag it onto an appropriate sheet of paper that we have to make a decision on. Okay? Under this box here, you'll see there's a whole lot of things called masters. These are where we make or control or use our sheets of paper from. And there will be probably default ones, won't there, already probably set up for you?
No, there is, see here, like there's, see that's one they've set up, A3, but a whole lot of stuff on it that we don't really need, but there you go.
Yeah, okay. So back in our layout book here, we've got a selection, but we can make our own. And we'll show you guys how to make your own sheets of paper. And when I say sheets of paper, we're just picking a sheet size, but you guys can make title blocks that are particular to you. Yeah? Your name, your ID, all that stuff, we can make your own title blocks. Yep. Okay. So under our working drawings, what do we got here, Mel? That's when I click on
I think I read that one out, that's just an.
yeah, what's that one? Oh, that's a perspective one.
Yeah, I think maybe Mark sent that one. So you want to just set up, show them how to do a master layer themselves?
Yeah. Are we going to get too many things going on for this one, or do you want to have a quick look?
Well, I think just showing them how to set a master
Okay,
layer, it'd be
cool.
fairly easy, you know?
So we want to make a new master. So you can, there's different ways. You can right click on that master's box, or you can, there are various buttons here that let you make a new master layout. Okay?
Right, yeah.
So you can find the button that says new master layout, there's one. And it comes up with that dialog box. It says, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want? So the first thing you do is you label it. And you might call it your, or he's going to just call it test, that's fine. You could call it your, so to me, I always put the sheet size first. So for me, if it's an A3, I'll say A3, and I normally go design template, for example, for my design drawings. So that when I go into my masters, I can go, A3 design template. Yep, and I know that's the one I'll set up. Whatever, you can call it whatever you want. A3 design template, and he's going to put a gap between the A3 and the design, beautifully. Okay, so now he's named it. Now you can pick the sheet size, and we typically work in the first, but up there, not oversized, not engineering, not architectural, just pick a sheet size. So he's going to pick the A3 as a sheet size, and he is going to keep it on landscape, okay, because that's the way we use our sheets generally, because most things are that way, inclined. Does that make sense? Yep, landscape typically. These margins are to do with where the print goes to. Me personally, I use 10 for those, but 15's fine. I just have like a little bit more space to work within, that's fine. 15's fine, and you go pretty much, everything's all good, create. Well, create. So he now has an A3 design template. Yep. Ready to go, ready to be used. So there it is. That's what it looks like. It's just a sheet of A3 paper. Yep. But in here, we can add things in. So we're not going to put all the detail in, but Mel might just show you that using the line tool, for example, using a rectangle, he could drag himself a box in there to create this. And that will go, every drawing that you put onto that sheet will have whatever you put on your master template. He's going to put a little bit of text on there. Doesn't matter that you see it in colour, that's colours, we'll talk about colour at some stage. It's going to make it nice and big.
Try and do that, all right.
He's going to chuck it into his
Sorry about the spelling here, so let's just
template there.
get that.
Okay. So you can put your logos in there, all kinds of stuff, all on that. And if you use that sheet, that will come up every single time. Because you've now made yourself that and put it onto that template. For me, I tend to, just so sometimes get lost, I put everything on the ArchiCAD layer when I put all the text and everything on the ArchiCAD layer. The ArchiCAD layer is the only layer you can't turn off. Okay, so every other layer you can turn on and turn off. ArchiCAD layer, you can't turn it off. So we don't ever draw an ArchiCAD layer except on something like this. This is a template, doesn't matter. We want it always on anyway. Does that make sense? So just be aware, sometimes the default layer of ArchiCAD comes up and it puts it on the layer because it can't make up its mind, and you've got it left there and you wonder why you can't turn it on and off. Okay? So it's just a good thing to do on something like that, just put it all under the ArchiCAD layer. Okay, done. So we want to now add a drawing into our publishing set now. Yep. So one of the buttons here says New Layout. You can click on that, and up comes the dialog box, and it says a few things. So what's the layout name? And Mal's going to put in the fact that we're going to put a ground floor plan in there. So he's going to label it ground floor plan, because that's the drawing we want, right, for this. Drawn our ground floor plan. We now want to put it on a sheet of paper. He's going to click on there, and guess what? One of the options for the master layout is this A3 design template that he just made. So you can pick the A3 design template, and pretty much that's all he really has to do at this stage, and he goes create. And up here, it has put a piece of paper in here based on what he just said. Yeah? There it is. Look, has all that information on all ready to go already, because he put it on that master template, on the template. Not on this drawing, that's already made, that's already done in your master. That's just a copy of your master being used for this drawing. Yeah? Okay. So now we want to get our drawing onto that piece of paper. We want to get a drawing on there now, don't we? So again, if we go up to our organizer, show organizer, and you have to be on your view map on the left-hand side, publisher on the right-hand side. You'll be able to see your ground floor plan there. Click and drop. Click and drag and drop onto there. Make sure you're on the right sheet. You'll see that comes up with a little thing there, and you have got yourself the drawing onto the sheet of paper. Okay, so we can now play around and manipulate it and move it until we get it in the right place. What scale was that, Mal, at? 1 to 50, was it? Still? So this is brilliant. So here you can see that at 1 to 50, is it going to fit onto this piece of paper? No, it's not going to fit on there. You can see it's not going to fit on there without even moving it. It might just about sneak on, but typically 1 to 100 is going to be fine, because at half the size of that, it's going to hose into the sheet of paper. Okay. So Mal's going to show you that if he highlights that and goes, oh, I can make it smaller.
Just shift clicking on the image, right? So that's what I'm doing, pressing shift and clicking on it.
Okay. So he's highlighting by doing the same thing, hold shift down, click on it.
Just off the top here, I'm hitting the settings, you can go Control T, and then it gives you size and appearance. See the scale?
It's telling what the scale is. Yeah. However, personally, I wouldn't do it that way. I'd be adjusting it back in my view map, changing the scale in my settings, just so I know. But that's cool. Now, there's one thing to point out. So Mal just is moving that round to try to get it to kind of fit on the page, and you can keep going until you go, oh, I'm happy with that. Okay, well, that's cool. I've got these kind of things done. So if he highlights that, the whole thing again, and he grabs this corner here, and he clicks on there, and it says, oh, I just want to stretch that down, adjust the, that one's all right. Is that the one that's adjusting the scale? No. That's a different one.
You tell me to stretch, are you?
Yeah, just to be, no, stretch.
Stretch is, see what it does to scale, guys, be careful that one.
So you can't stretch it. You go, oh, I just want to make it bigger and fit the page. You can't use that stretching one because it's changing the scale of your drawing. So there's a few little tricks that students go, oh, just make it fit the page a bit better, and then you end up with scales that aren't scales. Yeah, so we want to keep it at 1 to 100. Don't use your stretch to do things. Yeah. So then you just click away, and then it's set up on that sheet of paper. As it has some of the settings allow us to have different title blocks, things like that, to play around with. Okay. So we won't get into colour at this stage. No, leave it at that. We'll talk about other things. That's enough to get you the general principle. So that has taken you from project to view to publishing. Okay? So whatever you've seen there was what was drawn in your view map. Whatever you see on the piece of paper was what you set up in your view map. You change your view map, that automatically updates. Don't have to change anything on your publishing picture. It will update. You do any changes on your view map, it updates on your publishing. Yeah? So we don't have to do any changes in that publishing thing. We have to go back to our view map to do changes to the drawing, add things, take them away, whatever. Yep. Do you want to have a quick talk about the next stage?
I think that's probably enough,
Yeah.
actually, Richard, because I think we're probably.
I want
into-
them drawing.
I'll get them onto it now, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think that's helped, and the video chats about the publishing bit, you know. So next Monday, we just want to have a go at trying to do what we've shown you, and then if any mistakes that are made, we would hopefully go around and troubleshoot them and make sure make sure you've learned from them, basically. Because I think it's okay watching all us doing it, but there's no thing
You've
like
got
you
this.
better getting stuck in yourself,
Yeah.
you know.
Can I just point out that that last one there, all I'm pointing out is that is where we do our publishing. So you've created that drawing, right? You'll have created lots of drawings. You'll have elevations, sections, all kinds of stuff. But here we can collate them together and make a set of published drawings, and we will again drag across. We'll have our floor plan, roof plan, elevations, We put them all together and create PDFs in our publisher. And we're not going to show you that now. But that's how we publish things. Because you're not just going to have one drawing mostly. You're going to have a set of drawings. So we make a set of drawings in our publisher. Okay, so we've got those 4 steps. Project to set it up, view to where we set up the individual drawing, layout book to put on a piece of paper, and publish where we publish. That's how ArchiCAD works.
Do you ever use the same codes? You know when we did the paper drawings for Amos, and he got us to do the drawing number was LO2
Yeah.
or LO3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you use that same combination in there?
Yes, absolutely. So generally that is part of your master template, and there's things we can bring on there that are called, what are they called, the little hash things? But what they are is you put them in there.
Auto text, is it?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the term. But what it does, it individually picks up from whatever drawing number you will put onto your master by default, by itself. So it will tell you LO1, LO2, LO3, AO1, all those things. We're not getting silly on this because we're doing design, and we don't have to get worried about, it's not a big set. So the fact that it says this sheet is elevations will be sufficient.
Yeah,
I don't think you don't number it.
No, look, I mean, if you go to the architecture department or any architecture school and they do competition drawings and stuff, they're not doing LACS because they don't have to be able to relate and find something for pricing or contract documents. You're just trying to sell the proposal, and usually the person you're selling to might be someone who can't read drawings the way you guys can. So you might have a very simple, might even be a box. I've seen plenty of competition drawings with just a title there, and it could be a funny script, Gothic script or church, whatever. So you can show a logo, as Richard says, and just try and think of it as a design piece. And it's not wrong to put a type thing, but I think it makes it a bit mechanical for this stage, and you're going to get loads of that in the next course.
We'll show you how to do that when
You
you're
know,
making drawings and
yeah.
number it all.
Because there is a way of setting it up that once you set those publisher sets and drag them into a folder called location, assembly component, ArchiCAD will then call it CO1, AO1 for you, you know. So it's very clever. There's lots of things in here. I don't know how to use Morph to and stuff, but you know, we've only got a limited amount of time, and we give you a lot of things to do, and we try and crunch it back, but hey, it's a bit tricky. Anyway, do you want to get a start? Get stuck
Yeah,
in now?
so hopefully that helps you a little bit. And you can have a crack at that with your major project house. You can drag stuff across into your view map, set up a layer combination, set up the settings. Absolutely.